Don't you hate it when this happens? I certainly do, because I don't want coffee residue building up on my shower screen or dispersion plate or any exposed brass surfaces inside the group head. But I also hate using chemicals to dissolve coffee buildup in the group or any lime scale in the boilers or heat exchanger. I'm going to start with group maintenance in this video and cover the boilers and copper tubing in a second video to follow. One caveat. Your water's mineral content is a factor, but that discussion fits better with the second video, so that's where I'll address it. Just keep in mind that you might need to treat your water to achieve results like mine, and I'll go through all of that in the second video. But how do we get rid of or prevent coffee residue in the group without chemical cleaners? There are three basic approaches. The first is to rinse the head between shots, which is what I and probably most people have been doing since forever. It works quite well, although it interrupts the workflow a bit. The second is to use an ultra-fine shower screen that acts as a barrier, preventing coffee from passing upward. The third is to lay some type of filter or screen directly on the coffee so that it stays put in the basket. We'll look at the first two briefly and the third in considerable detail. So get comfortable. We've got a lot of material to cover today.
Oh my God.
It's like a miracle.
Here's what my group looks like after putting around 15 kilos of coffee through this machine over several months with no chemical cleaning. I rinse the head with hot water using a blank portafilter and wipe the shower screen with a damp rag from time to time. And this shower is quite clean inside and out. A Q-tip finds a little coffee residue in the joint. This is the same screen that I've used throughout, although I swap it briefly now and then for testing. I've never soaked it or used any detergent on it. Same for the dispersion plate and the chamber behind it. Wet rag only, maybe once a week. The little plate is clean. That's not coffee residue, it's cupric oxide. I have a blank mounted permanently in a cheap portafilter, so it's always handy. If I'm pulling a few shots in succession, I don't bother after each one. I'll finish the cue and then do it. But because of the hot surfaces, it soon becomes difficult to rinse coffee residue away with hot water alone. So if I'm looking at more than a minute or two between shots, I'll do the routine. But is there a better way? This is a superfine shower screen from IMS that's designed to prevent coffee residue from migrating upward. The coffee stops here. You can just replace your current shower screen with it. A very easy fix. Here's a standard screen under the microscope. The perforations are 0.2 of a millimeter in diameter. And here's the fine one, with perforations 35/1000ths of a millimeter in diameter. I've used it, and I'm not a huge fan. It's a quite effective barrier, but you still have to rinse it regularly. I'd recommend it in a commercial setting, but not at home. It's not bad, it's just that at home, if you're rinsing regularly already, this doesn't bring much to the party. In a busy shop, it would. Now let's try covering the puck surface with something. This absolutely will keep the shower and group head clean, but is there a penalty? Let's consider our options here. Paper filters and metal screens, and perhaps a combination if we're not satisfied. I've got 3 types of paper, all of which are easy to obtain. These pre-cut from Chemex white filters by an outfit called Good Brothers Coffee. I also have some pre-cut ones sold by Cafiza, which I think are made by Cafec, but don't quote me. And I have AeroPress papers that I've cut myself. I've done 5 shots with every tested configuration. I'll show you a characteristic example for each case. Let's begin with a plain fill and tamp like we do all the time as a reference shot. The puck looks fine and the coffee tasted great, but notice what happened to the shower screen. Even when you get everything right, the top surface of the coffee is going to get churned up a bit and particles will foul the screen and the components behind. Residue dries quickly on the hot metal and builds up over time, creating a mess. That's what I want to avoid. So here goes. The Chemex filter is up first. Moistening the papers makes them easier to handle. With these, I got a noticeably faster shot, about 50% faster. I'm not sure how to explain that, except to suggest that the paper might deflect some of the water around the puck, bypassing the coffee and running down the sides of the basket. That's an intuitive explanation, just a hypothesis, and I really have no way of testing it. There does seem to be a gap between the coffee and the basket wall. Now the Cafiza paper. This one pulled noticeably faster too, and my intuitive guess remains the same. It might be deflecting some water down the sides. I don't see a gap in this case, but the speed was almost the same. You might say, well, just grind finer. But think about that. Grinding finer could make this worse, not better. If the coffee bed becomes more solid, that might encourage even more of the water to bypass it. So this could have an ironic effect on your efforts to dial in your grind. Now for the AeroPress paper. This one behaved differently from the other two. It gave me a shot time almost matching the reference shot. You have to cut them yourself. Although it's not difficult. Radians, mes enfants. And you thought you'd never see them again. In the end, I was not impressed with any paper filter used alone, although the AeroPress ones did the least violence to the shot mechanics, keeping the time and flavor close to the reference shot. Now let's try some metal. This is a thin, fine screen. It has very little effect on time or flavor, but it's a bit messy. It's very flimsy and fiddly. I'm not loving it. I'm going to exclude it. I don't think it's worth the bother. Here I've got the shower screen from my Cafiza robot with the little red grip removed. This resulted in very little change and no mess. Or not much mess. Very effective in keeping the group clean too. Now for this Profitec branded thick screen. These are sold under myriad brands. I'll need a slightly larger basket for this one. I saw very little change in shot mechanics. It's not hard to remove, but the edges are rough and not much fun to handle. And there's a lot of coffee grit stuck on the underside. However, it works very well for keeping the head clean. Using the metal screens alone is a noticeably better option than using any of the paper filters alone. The metal ones don't appear to deflect water, although they might alter the water distribution that your shower screen is designed to deliver, but the violence seems minimal. With the tidiness issue in mind, let's try a combination of filter papers with metal screens. I'm counting on the screens to overcome the paper's tendency to deflect water, if in fact that's what's happening. Using paper with the thick screen, there was no problem with shot times. It's no longer messy. The paper keeps the underside clean, but it is seriously fiddly now. There's some kind of vacuum keeping it in place, which I didn't notice when I used it without the paper. Now, paper with the Cafiza screen. Shot mechanics and flavor were barely affected. It performed well in terms of cleanliness and very well for ease of use. This would be my preference. Top marks here for effectiveness and convenience. So to wrap that part up, the combo worked best. Metal screens appear to defeat the paper's tendency to deflect water, while the paper prevents coffee grit from sticking to the metal. So they work better together than they do singly. If you're going to use a combination, I don't think it matters much which paper you choose. You also get a drier, denser puck that knocks out easily, so it's a bit tidier in that way too. My first choice is the combination, the Cafiza screen along with a paper filter. I was pretty skeptical when I started, but after a couple of weeks of testing, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm going to experiment further. I'll stick with the combination of a paper filter and the Cafiza shower screen for at least a month or two because it doesn't change the shot much and it's the most convenient option. If I find reason to stop, I will let you know. If I find over time that one type of paper is better or worse than the others, I'll let you know that too. I'm not convinced that the flavor is quite as good as the reference shot, but I'll be taking my time and trying different coffees, so I'll have more to say about that later. If you want to try using a top screen or filter, it's important to know that it can affect shot dynamics, which in turn might impose a flavor penalty. Paper filters used alone can complicate your grind adjustments, so you need to test, especially for taste. So to wrap up, our goal is a clean group without detergent. It can be done without a lot of fuss. You might disagree with the idea that chemical cleaners could be harmful to flavor or health, but if you can keep the machine clean without them, there is an unquestionable economic reason. Why spend money on something you don't need? I think that simple, frequent rinsing, as many of us have been doing, and the paper and screen combination that I'll be testing long term are the two best options for home users. In a commercial setting, I would go with the ultra-fine shower screen, which might not eliminate the need for cleaning chemicals, but it will probably reduce your reliance on them and save you money. Fairly soon, I'll post the second part. Our goal next time will be to avoid descaling. I will explain why we should avoid it. We'll talk about depassivation, about the water's mineral content, filtering, ion exchange, and a few tricks for keeping our boilers and heat exchangers clean the natural way. Other topics coming soon will include using a lot of different types of paper filters on the bottom of the basket and finding out what effect they have. We'll put them under the microscope and see if that tells us anything useful. I will also consider how bottom filters work with different basket shapes and shower screen design. In another video, I'll explain why I uninstalled the flow control kit and show you in detail how to do as good a job with a pressure gauge alone. So keep in touch. Cheers!